We're gonna be like, we're gonna go up to 100 now.
That's true. My daddy, I always used to say, I heard all over more than
Me
anywhere.
too.
Okay, they think they make a mistake and leave that, my cataract down. Hold on, I can call it now.
Or you can't see without your glasses.
Can't see without, can't see without.
Fellowshipping.
Uh-oh, you wanna set up?
Sorry. I was just enjoying the conversation. It's one of the wonderful things about getting old. That's what we talk about. we compare notes. Oh, you had that too? Oh, well, this is what I had done. Yeah. If you'll do this, like we're all experts. Yeah. 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 Exactly. Yeah. That's a trip under. That's right. Good to see you. Hope everybody's had a good one. Busy. It is what it is. Used to try to start off by mentioning those that are sick ones or infirmed ones, we might say. Bob and Judy's doing better, and I think he went through dialysis today. He's going to do it the Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays now instead of doing it every night. I think it's going to work out a whole lot better for him. And Judy's doing some better as well, and she's got to get her strength back too, because she's had lost a good bit of weight. But keep them in mind. And Jody and Carrie. Jody is still recuperating also now from his little stroke, and he's having a home care therapist come in and helping him at home. Good to see Nancy back. Maybe she won't give something to everybody here. But it's good to see her. And Gwen's got the problem with the knees, and so she's hobbling around. I think you got what, shots Monday?
I get one, at least one
Monday, okay. And then what was it? Surgery 29th. Okay, all right. Knew it was in the 20s. I was trying to remember the date. Keep in mind these others we talk about from week to week: Hope Parker and Shelley Green, Billy Harris, and Danny Taylor, and Paul's sister-in-law, and our shut-ins. Keep them in mind. Lyndon, Virginia, and then Sister Jimmy and Hilda and Lana, Christy, and there may be others that we talk about from time to time. Make sure make it known to me who they are, and so I might be able to add them. And when we get all of those figured out, we need, of course, try to get the information to Milton as well. So we'll try to add these things to our bulletin list. And so you might be able to have the names and everything handy to you, so that if you want to call or send cards or things of this nature, you'll remember better by being able to look at it instead of just trying to remember what you might have seen on the screen or what we have announced here. So try to remember it that way if you can. Any others we need to add or that we can remember? Those are the ones that I recalled. All right. Judges chapter 20 is where we are tonight. Judges chapter 20. And as you turn there, we'll try to begin with a short word of prayer. So if you would bow with me, please. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be thy great and holy name. Our thanks be given thee, O Father, for the day we've had and for the blessings of life up to this particular point in time, O Father. And we know that we have been blessed above measure and above our deserving, but help us always be mindful that thou art the giver of all things. We're also mindful of the spiritual blessings that we have in thy Son. We're grateful for thy love and thy mercy, the long suffering. also blessings undeserved. But we're grateful, oh Father, that thou hast shown mercy and been long suffering with us to this point. Help us as we continue to test thy patience and the life that we live, that we will seek to do all things that would be in keeping with thy will. But we are mindful, Father, that we do say and think things contrary to thy will on occasion. And we beg thy mercy and thy forgiveness, and help us to always be in proper and right relationship with thee. We're grateful for the kingdom that's here and to be citizens of it, and for the congregation of thy people that meets at this place. Help us always strive to serve thee faithfully as we live here upon this earth. We're mindful of those we have mentioned, oh Father, that are sick, those not only of our number, but those that are friends and neighbors, and those that we know of that need thy help and thy assistance and thy providential care. And we pray that thou would look down upon them and help them to recover from those things which are causing them discomforts, and be with those that assist them, that they may have the expertise to help them be back on their feet very shortly. We pray, Father, for the nation, continue to bless it and help all those that are leaders to seek counsel from thy will, so that we might continue to enjoy the privileges of being able to serve and worship thee. Bless us now as we enter this study. Help us to have our minds centered upon thy word, that we might be able to use the things that we learn to better our life and our service unto thee, and strengthen our faith. Bless us, keep us in thy care, and continue to be with us until the end. In Jesus' name we ask it. Amen. Judges chapter 20. Now, when you go back and you look at the last little bit of chapter 19, you remember, of course, this is dealing with the Levite that had taken the concubine, as you might remember, and then she had left home, and then he goes to retrieve her, and he's coming back home and comes in through the area as he leaves from the area of Bethlehem, as you can recall seeing here, and he's going to make his way up about 5.5 miles to what we now know as Jerusalem, is known as Jebus then. And it was getting late in the day, so he gets to the area of Gibeah, and will stay there. But of course, there was an elderly man that kept him from being on the streets. The house was accosted by those that were, as we know, as sodomites, and were seeking to take him and to abuse him all the night. And of course, there was the occasion when they ultimately just basically just threw out his concubine to him, and then they abused her all night long, and then she eventually makes her way back to the house where her husband is, but she only makes it to the threshold. We are not told as to whether or not she died. We're assuming that that is the case, that he's going to pick her up, take her back home to the area around Ephraim, which would be in this area here. And then out of his rage over the circumstances, he's going to take a knife and cut her up into 12 pieces, and then send her to the different tribes of Israel. And as is stated, as you recall from chapter 19, verse 30, that they hadn't seen anything like this from the time that they had come out of Egypt. And that's what brings us then to chapter 20. And if you'll notice that as you go into this and you enter into the study of this chapter, you have to well remember that the disposition of the Jews and the like to be up to this point had been pretty much indifferent to God's law, and especially the command that had been given them regarding the possessing of the land. And that there were several different stipulations, as you might remember. Number one, that they were not to mix with the people. They were not to allow themselves to be influenced if they were going to be mixed with them. That was one of the things that was the worry that obviously that God had in that respect. And knowing as well that if they mixed with these people, that they would end up being influenced by the cultures, and which were idolistic themselves, or idol worshipers. And so that's exactly what had happened. The other stipulation you might remember is this would not have been something that would have been an issue at all had they just simply followed the command to do what? Eliminate them. Just eradicate these people out of the land. Just eliminate them. That was the judgment. that was involved here. If you're going to take the land, just eradicate these people. Do not involve yourself with them. But that's exactly what they did. But since now they didn't do that, and now that years have passed, Moses since has died, Joshua is gone, the elders that remained after Joshua are now gone. There's the time period, of course, beginning of Othniel, that brings us up to this particular point now, and the time spans when they judged. Basically, things were held in order, but when they died, what? Okay, they get back into this period of evil behavior. Then, as was pointed out to them, they're going to be brought into subjection and of some neighboring tribe or group of people. And as you've seen this over and over and over with these set of circumstances, when there was, especially late in this series of studies, one of the key pieces of information that is repeated, and especially in the first of these chapters, is what line? Well, it's two of them. That's one of them. What was the other one? But it would that one there is as a consequence of the one that's in mind. There is no king in Israel. They have no really, well, let's put it, sanction. And God would be the one to sanction them, right? So there's no sanctioned source of authority. That is, God, of course, is their authority, and the law is their authority, but there's no one to oversee that this would be something that would be established and be administered as it should be. And when there is no source of authority and everybody's behaving on the basis of their own accord and assimilating as they have throughout these years with all these idolatrous peoples of the land, then all these problems have occurred. So now that serves as, again, even though this is something that we continually notice, we've gone from chapter to chapter, it has to be remembered because it plays a role in subsequent events that are going to be seen, even as you're pointing out here in chapter 20. So now, the key word in chapter 20 and verse 1 is what? What's the key word? It's the first word. Then. The word then usually represents what? Okay, this is the aftermath. You know, this is what happened. This is what's going to take place. Or if this does happen, this is going to take place by virtue of God having told it. So that's what took place. Now, then. So the then is now coming into operation. The children of Israel went out, and the congregation was gathered together as one man, even from Dan to Beersheba. You remember we noted that as far as the expanse of the kingdom itself. Let's see if I can catch up with one of those real quick, just so that we have an idea of the expanse of the kingdom. I wanted to get one where you can kind of see it. This, I think you might be able to get it from this right here. If you're looking, the northern section of the kingdom, there's Dan. Can you see my pointer? All right. So you're looking at the northern portion of the kingdom. When you come down to Beersheba, you're looking down in this area right in here. So this is what he's talking about. It was a very unusual thing when you look at this language. They were together as one man, even from Dan to Beersheba, the land of Gilead, with the land of Gilead unto the Lord in Mizpah. And let's go back just a little bit to where we were, because this map, I think, all right, went past it. Excuse me. Went the wrong way anyway. Okay. Now, if you notice, Mizpah's here. Okay. Now, a lot of what we're going to be finding in our study in chapter 20 is going to involve Mizpah. Here is Gibeah, where the situation occurred with the Levite and his concubine. So kind of remember again the trek that they had taken from Bethlehem north, get into Gibeah right here. They had thought about going to Ramah, but it had already gotten dark. So this is where they've stayed. And this is where these events have happened. He eventually makes his way back up into Ephraim. And it's at this point now you're seeing as all the people having received this information, a strange way of getting information, but it indicates that he had people that was sent out to these different tribes to relay this information with, here's a hand or an arm or leg or whatever of this woman, and with the story that was involved. That's what's uniting all of these people right here. So it was something that provides an insight here of the people's reaction to the Levites' message and as to what had happened. So now this is the then. Everything has begun to kind of come into play right here as this has had incited this sense of a need for retribution. So now there's a significant amount of talk that is going on about this. And what is one of those phrases that we use when we hear of such things like this? They need to do something about this. They need to do something, or we've got to do something about it. That's kind of the way we do things. That something's got to be done. And we're just not going to we're not going to stand by and let something like this take place. So many of the, I think, representatives from some of the tribes are obviously, and of course, the men began together shortly after this, but there are some representatives, it seems, that are going to be sending some messages and going back and forth as about what they're going to do. And they may be meeting in the area of Mizpah, which in fact is right on the northern section of the tribe of Benjamin. And it's going to be in the tribe of Benjamin. Much of what we're going to be talking about is going to be taking place right here. All right. So they're going to act in response to this atrocity that's taking place here. Comment, question in verse 1. Verse 2, and the chief of all the people, which is kind of interesting. Yeah. You begin to wonder as to how that was determined. There must have been, I would suspect, I know a little bit about human nature. I imagine most of you do too. Let's just kind of bring it to the New Testament period, even subsequent to this. You had those that were elders in the congregations that had been established, and they will be like even what you're seeing today on occasion. Those that are leaders like to get together and kind of talk about what the circumstances are, how they might be able to improve their situations and things like that. That ultimately led to the ecclesiastical system, which led to the apostasy away from the church. But here you got a situation that's kind of similar to this. I would suspect, I think it's a safe presumption to make, that there would be some of the leaders of the different tribes that would get together on occasion, talk about situations. And if I have any understanding about anything like this right here, they would kind of choose a chief spokesman. And that kind of seems to be a circumstance right here. So the chief of all the people, even of all the tribes of Israel, presented themselves in the assembly of the people of God, 400,000 footmen that drew the sword. Now that's where they have assembled. They have come to Mizpah. And this is where this assembly is going to be made. And you've got 400,000 men that are ready to go to war, that are carrying the swords. Now, this again is still a little bit amazing because, for the most part, these tribes have, in the recent years, exhibited a rather strong sense of independence from the others. They just never has been. It's kind of like, I don't know, Mississippi, Alabama, especially when you start talking about sports teams and things of this nature. You've got strong rivalries and things of this kind, and which is still a little odd here because they're all related. And, but that still doesn't make a difference. You know, they've got their lands, they've got their people, they've got, you know, their areas that are assigned to them. So, you know, what's the old saying? Don't mess with Texas. Well, you know, don't mess with Benjamin or don't mess with Judah, whatever the certain situation may be. They're just kind of that way. We saw that in the situation with some of the other tribes or other judges, especially in the areas around Gilead, you might remember, during the times of Jephthah and all of that sort of business. So it was kind of interesting that now with this blatant independence that they have shown through these years, during the times of the judges thus far, there's only been very few occasions when, even by the urging of a judge, that they would come together and work together. But since this was something, as we saw in chapter 19, the last verse, that they had not seen anything like this since they had come out of Egypt, this atrocity right here has incited an anger that they have evidently not felt before. And the odd thing about this too is that it's against their own people. I mean, they are Benjamites, but they're Jews. So, you know, they're sons of Jacob just like everybody else is. And, but they're just absolutely appalled about how that these people have behaved themselves and dealt with this Levite's wife or concubine. So now they've gathered in Mizpah here and they're ready to go to war. So that brings us now to verse 3. Now the children of Benjamin heard that the children of Israel, which still again is kind of strange language, which was the only way I guess that you could term this. They're having to separate themselves from the other tribes by language. That's what Samuel's having to do here to distinguish between them. Because Benjamin, you remember, is part of the children of Israel too. But now the children of Benjamin heard that the children of Israel were gone up to Mizpah. Then said the children of Israel, tell us how that this how was this wickedness? So you got to imagine now what the people of Benjamin might have been thinking when they learned that there's this massive army of 400,000 people is gathered up on the northern section of their tribal land. And that army, I think, was there to serve as clearly a sign of the other tribes' strength and their unity. And that would be an impressive thing when you take that into account. But now, before anything happens, that's one of the problems. I don't know if you call it a problem or not, but this passage here does not go into a great deal of detail. You kind of have to read between the lines. It's what is taking place here. Before any battle is fought, then you've got, I would suspect that they're going to be representatives from all the other 11 tribes that are going down to Gibeah or some of these other places round about. And this is kind of I guess you might say, a diplomatic group of people. They're asking what the people's interpretation of the wicked event that had occurred. So that's what you see in the latter portion of the verse. Tell us, how was this wickedness? So explain to us what your interpretation is as to what happened. Just give us some feedback of what you know, if you do or not, as to what it is that went on. And that's going to help us a great deal to kind of figure out what kind of approach to take. That is a diplomatic course of action, you know, instead of just going in there and wiping the place up, which they probably could have done. And I say probably because of what we're going to learn a little bit later. Had there not been any effort taken whatsoever to discuss this with God as well, then we don't know exactly how all this would have turned out. But if you were taking consideration just the numbers, 400,000 men against just 700 that would have been in Gibeah. That would not have been an issue. There would not have been anybody left in Gibeah if you just go in on those terms. But evidently, the people of Israel have a little bit more respect because they are countrymen. And this is kind of what you would expect out of it. All right. Verse 4. Any question, comment on verses 2 or 3? Not all at once. Okay. Verse 4. And the Levite, who's the husband of the woman that was slain, answered and said, I came to Gibeah that belongeth to Benjamin, and I and my concubine to lodge. Let's just go ahead. We're going to read verse 4, 5, and 6 as well. And the men of Gibeah rose up against me and to set the house round about me upon me by night, and thought to have slain me and my concubine have they forced that she's dead. And I took my concubine, cut her in pieces, sent her throughout all the country of the inheritance of Israel, for they have committed lewdness and folly in Israel. And what he's doing, he's specifying Benjamin in this situation. And behold, ye are all children of Israel, give here your advice and counsel. So now, what you've got in this situation in this verse, as it goes through verse 7 right here, this Levite gets involved in the discussion. So that kind of gives you an idea that from this diplomatic corps that had come into Gibeah, that this has raised some interest in this situation. And perhaps now that there is even a group that may have come out of Gibeah or some of the other areas around about, and are now, they're having some conversation about the situation, where now the Levite is presenting his case to these folks out of the city of Gibeah here. And if they happen up to this time that this diplomatic corps is coming here, if they were unaware of what it was that had happened, they're aware now, because this is now being something that is clearly identified. Many of these people that these diplomatic people had come into the area had asked about, what's your interpretation of what happened? We don't know, what are you talking about? There may have been a lot of that. Some might have known. But now that the interest in this situation has been piqued, I would suspect that there's going to be several that are going to come out and discuss this issue. And this is where the Levite is going to make his point. And so it's kind of interesting here too when you look at it. If they are aware that and of course they are now aware that since he's mentioned it, it presents this kind of a standoff at this point. And because what you find right here, that there's not going to be really what you would think that would normally might be the response in this situation. And it's kind of, I have a suspicion that after he has outlined what it was that had taken place, I can envision, considering the events that are going to take place now, I can envision that they're telling him, so what's the problem? So what's the big deal? I can kind of see that that's what it was that they would be saying, which is going to further incense the rest of the Jews in this situation, and does give you an indication just how deep in wickedness that these people are in at this particular point. So anyway, as we've already studied, he's explaining what he had done. He came to Gibeah to lodge there overnight, and provides, I think, all the other details and speaks about what happened regarding his concubine. And when you look at verse 5, I would imagine part of the explanation too, that I had come into Gibeah thinking it was going to be safer here, took the refuge in the house of the old man. We're surrounded by this group of men who want to, if you look at this language, incidentally, in verse 5, that they beset the house round about me, upon me by night, and thought to have killed him. The whole idea was to abuse him to death. That seems to be the indication. I think he takes that from what it was that happened to her, because it did happen to her, and that they would not have let him go, I don't figure, until that likely would have taken place, or it would have not eventually caused him death. Go ahead. Yeah, it's just a matter of a message being sent to the other tribes with the explanation. This is what happened. What do you think about this? Give counsel to this. You know, this is, you need to think on what it was that's taking place. Well, it had its effect. Well, the effect was everybody, we're going to react to this. This is something we haven't heard of, and we're going to deal with this. So all the people gathered together. You got these 400,000 troops that have now descended upon Mizpah, which gives you the idea that his message was effective. He's got his message across, and they're reacting. Well, we don't know. It is likely the fact. Yeah. Yeah. We, at the very beginning of that circumstance, when she came back to the house and just made it to, got her hand on the threshold. Remember, he comes out thinking perhaps she's still alive. Get up, but she doesn't. She doesn't move. So, and the passage doesn't tell you as to whether or not she's dead, but you presume that that's most likely the case, because he puts her up on the donkey and carries her back, and that's when he kills her. Now, like say, if she was still alive and he cut her up like that, then the atrocity is obviously going to be as much on him it would be on her. Yes, this passage tells us that was the case. But when we were looking at it in chapter 19, we're not told at that particular point. But we're able to see it here, that this is the situation here, that my concubine, she forced that she is dead. So that's the first that we get of, it's kind of would be, you don't question inspiration, but you would like to have that little piece of information at that point to kind of get an understanding as to what is going to be coming. No, he doesn't mention that. No, that little piece of information is not there. But I would suspect that was something that they would have even considered as normal, because what we've talked about, and we'll mention it again in a little bit as well, the status that women had during this time. It was basically you're just your objects. No. Yeah, to keep him from being killed. Yeah, he was protecting himself on that case. But yeah. What's that now?
The leaders of Gilgal
the Gibeonites. Yeah, that's most likely the ones that are coming out in this discussion right here, and they are evidently defending the rights of these fellows to carry on what they do. So that's the reason I was saying, after the Levite is presented his case, you can kind of see with what's going to follow, what their reaction may be. It's like, so what? So what's the big deal here? And that's not going to help the situation, obviously. But when you deal with people of this kind of disposition and you're trying to point out their error, this is the kind of reaction that you get. If you haven't watched TV lately, those are things that you see even now. Right. And they're very militant. And that's the kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah. Well, if you're looking, yeah. Well, the West Bank is the area that you're going to see right in here. And then, of course, some of the other area is going to be in this area down in here in south, the area of Gaza. So that's where a lot of that's going on at the present time. So anyway, so this Levite explains that they had come there to stay there overnight, and he thought it was going to be safer by doing so, and then explains what all is happening. And then, as was brought up here, and I think it's important to really note this, he mentions they forced themselves, these men did, on his concubine, left her for dead, and eventually she did die. And that, to me, is an interesting way of framing the circumstances themselves. How is it that they forced themselves on her? You know, it's because I'm the one that gave it to him, so that kind of thing. So it's just, as we kind of touched on that a second ago, but he's the one that made that point. All right. So verse 6. So after finds her, determines that she's dead, took my concubine, cut her in pieces. It's interesting that he would even admit to something of that nature. But I mean, you know, body is a body, but still not respectful to it. Yeah, right, exactly. And I sent her throughout all the country of the inheritance of Israel, for they have committed lewdness and the folly. So now, when you consider the atrocious behavior of these men of Gibeah here, then you still have to ask yourself about the action of the Levite is whether it's any less than that. But you know, he didn't kill her, but he basically gave her a death sentence right in doing what he did. But it is important to note that he did not mention those little details. So. But yeah, right. So the purpose, as Brother Elvis was pointing out, what this was doing here, he sent these things out. So it's kind of mailing them out, and to incite the anger and the reaction that you're seeing in the people are now being pointed out in this text here. And so what we're finding again is what we had just noted. When you look at the latter portion of the verse, it indicates the cultural disposition of the day, that so little regard for women. They were mostly just to satisfy lust, produce children, be slaves. It's about all it was they amounted to, the men during those times. But he expresses here that what he and others knew was something that was lewd and folly. The term lewd from zamah, which is a heinous crime, is what wow, that did that. Let me get my Bible back, if I can get it back. Give me just a second here. I like to have my text ahead of me here. There we go. It is a heinous crime. This is the term lewd, an evil purpose and design. Evil design has a reference to incest, licentiousness, adultery, harlotry. All of those terms are wrapped up in that word lewd. And then the term folly, which is we have looked at before, is nebula. And that's moral wickedness, that which is profane, that which is disgraceful. So they know that that's what this is. And that's the reason why we know, as we pointed out last time, that when they came to the house and wanted to know the man, that this was not just to make his acquaintance. This is what they were trying to do. And that was to abuse him in a sexual way. Right. Same things that we saw, same terminology, in fact, that you saw in Genesis, the 19th chapter. And then verse 7, so he's now going to make the appeal to this assembled tribes here as to what's going to be the acceptable response to such a deed here. And still interesting to me that him being a Levite, who's supposed to be a spiritual leader of the people, what does he not do that you would think as a Levite they should have done? I mean, is this something that, am I so far out that this would not be something that you could even, he never makes appeal to God's law. You know, there's no reference to the law as to these circumstances whatsoever. He's just looking at this as an affront to human dignity, which most everybody, I think, accepted that particular view that this is not something that ought to be done. And if there was any knowledge of things that had happened with the occurrences that took place in Genesis 19 that remained in the minds and the history of the people, and that would have been part of the written law, that record, because Moses would have provided that. And it would have been in the ark, that would have been in the tabernacle back up in Shiloh. So these are things that they ought to have been constantly exposed to by coming together at Shiloh and worshiping, having the law read to them, and all these kinds of things. But there's no appeal to the law at all. And that still makes it an interesting observation, because if in fact that he's calling this lewd, it's this wickedness and it's profane, it's disgraceful, what is the standard that determines that? Yeah. But there's no mentioning of it. You know, why didn't he not say that this is an affront to God's law? This is something that is in violation of God's law, and those that are responsible for such things, we know what the law says. And that's what he was really trying to impress upon. Now he may be, and we may be presuming the fact that everybody there knows this what he's talking about, but most of these people haven't had any contact with the law. That's the reason why they're in the connected situation that they're in. So, no, doesn't seem that way. No. So this, when you think about it, just a lot of these little questions kind of come up when you read through these things. He's making an appeal to something that most of the people know is unacceptable behavior, it's atrocious behavior. But what is the standard? When everything else that most of these people have been doing may not have been necessarily up to this point, but they had been carrying on immoralities, adulteries. Yes. And a lot of it having to do with idol worship and all this kind of thing. And now, all of a sudden, they got a sense of, abiding by God's will at this particular point. It's kind of convenient, isn't it? So it's rather interesting. Of course, that's, again, rather typical, isn't it? When you find people that are in situations like this, they will at least assume certain things of that nature and without really getting down to the heart of it. Well, let's go down on verse 8. And all the people arose as one man, saying, we will not any of us go to his tent, neither will any of us turn into his house. And so all the people were united. They weren't going anywhere until justice is served. So at the time when the Levite spells this out, and so if there was any misunderstanding as to why they're here, he's clarified it for the 11 tribes right now. Well, we're not going anywhere until this is taken care of. Now, there may have been, again, some of those that would have been the representatives out of Gibeah, and that would have heard this. And so I suspect when the meeting itself is over, that everybody's going to be they'll be going back into Gibeah, or how you want to pronounce it, and would let them know exactly what the disposition of the people of these other tribes are going to be and what we're going to be up against. Let's look at any comment on those. What we're going to read now is verses 9 through 11. But now, this shall be the thing which we will do to Gibeah. We will go up by lot against it. That is the determination as to which tribe is going to go and fight against it. And the reason why we're going to do that is because, number one, there's 400,000 of us. In Gibeah itself, there's only 700. So it's not going to take but just, a few really for us to be able to do this. There's no reason for the entire 400,000 men just to go in there and do that and put them all at risk. So what we're going to do is we're going to take 10 men of 100 throughout the tribes of Israel, and 100 of 1,000, 1,000 of 10,000 to fetch victuals for the people. Well, in other words, some of them we're going to just simply take care and feed those that are going to be out there. And so that this they may do, that when they come to Gibeah of Benjamin, according to the folly that they have wrought in Israel. And verse 11, so all the men of Israel will gather together against the city, knit together as one man. So now, when you consider, again, the numbers here, as is pointed out, it's not going to take that many people just to handle the city of Gibeah on this mission right here. The others will carry food for those necessary. You're talking about a tent, basically, is what we're talking about. Take 40,000 men. Really, it's not going to be that necessary for that many, so it's going to be brought down even from that. But there's where they're starting. And also is interesting here is the choice of the language. Especially when you look at the text there in in verse 10, at the latter portion of verse 10, that when they come to Gibeah of Benjamin, according to all the folly that they have rendered. So what we're going to do, if you note that language, according to the folly. Now, when you hear that, what comes to your mind when you listen to them say, when we come to the city of Gibeah of Benjamin, what our intention is to do according to all the folly that they have wrought in Israel. That's an interesting use of language there. Now, it makes you wonder what their intent might have been initially, but I think it's probably easier to find. We may be overcomplicating it because when they stated according to the folly, well, what was the folly? It not only involved the woman, but it involved the attempt on the Levite too. So we know what they did to her. So it makes you think we're going to do it according to the folly. Are we going to go in there and rape and abuse everybody in the city? It makes you wonder if that's what their intention would have been. Well, that doesn't seem to make sense because all they would be doing is just acting on the same folly itself. So you have to look at it from the standpoint that this is because of what these men did. The result was the woman died. So they're going to bring death on the city of Gibeah. So that's what that means. But sometimes, you have a tendency when you read some words, words mean things. So you kind of look something that's done according to this. Now, why is it that I'm making an issue of that? You have any idea? I know you can't read my mind, but if I'm going to do something according to the folly, what was that in the law? Eye for eye. So that's the reason I'm mentioning this. So this is part of what's involved in it. And you wonder if their intention was to do this to bring them to death. But obviously, I don't think that would be the case. I think it's since they caused the death, they're limiting to that particular aspect of it. They brought about her death, they're going to bring about theirs. So when you look into terms and you start thinking about it in connection with the law and things that were stated. Remember, they're at least making some appeal to the law, even though they weren't applying much of it, or they would have not known much about it. So anyway, that's something that comes together. All right. And so you got all these 11 tribes that are united against Benjamin here. The text says that they were knit together. That's an interesting word too. Kaber in the Hebrew, which means an associate, a fellow or companion. What does that kind of resemble? You come to the New Testament, or even though there's a word that we use, fellowship. They're in a joint participation. Okay. So that seems to be kind of a similar concept. They're all associates and in fellowship in this effort that they're going to undertake as they're going to be going in to the city of Gibeah. Okay, I was looking at the clock wrong. All right, thought I had about 20 minutes. The long hand doesn't show up as well as you'd like to think it would. Anyway, I better stop there because I'm running out of time. Because I was fixing to go about 10 minutes. Because I just see it. I can see it better right here. So anyway, we'll be able to pick up from that particular point now that the diplomacy has basically come to an end. There's going to be some more effort in that regard, but for all practical purposes, you already get a gist of what is going to be coming, and then the actions that are going to be taken from there are still rather interesting. Number 242. $242. I remember as a teenage boy, one of the things I used to like to do, I imagine Milton probably did this, I don't know, Elvis may have too, but one of the things we used to like to do is like to go buy model cars and stuff and put them all together and assemble them, things of that nature. And of course, one of the things I like to do as well was the old World War II planes. I used to put a lot of them together because I always loved the sleek look that a lot of them had. It was all kind of interesting. And using the application of all this, you had a number of different pieces that would be there. You had your instructions and you had your glue. Of course, you would follow step one. You take this part and you put it together with this part. So you glue it, put it together. Then you take step number two. You take this part, you put it to this one. That's what the instruction tells you. You take that part, put it together. You take point number three, instructions. I keep emphasizing instructions tell you take this part and you put it with this one. So everything fits together like it's supposed to. Now, if you don't follow the instructions, what's likely going to happen, Milton? I mean, you may have a concept in your head as to how it ought to be, but when you don't follow the instructions, especially how this, then I didn't think about that. So I have to take it all apart, basically start or just get rid of it since it's glued now. So I have to go get another one or something of that nature. There are a lot of parts that are involved in living the human life. God knows that. There are a lot of circumstances with which we have to deal. As we've emphasized a number of occasions, many choices that we have to make. But in going to heaven, we can envision in our minds what it is that we can or might be able to do in order to satisfy God, and we could dream up our own concepts as to how to do that. But in doing so, not following the instructions, we're going to make a mess out of it, and it's not going to resemble what it is that God is going to want. And therefore, it's as the Lord would state to those that were trying to get into the marriage feast, I never knew you. I don't recognize you. This is not what I want. And so it is the fact now that in following the instructions, we put our lives together piece by piece according to his instruction. When we do it like that, it's an ordered life. And it's one that brings about the kind of satisfaction that comes to God, to knowing and to us, knowing that we have done whatever it is that he's explained to us that we need to do. Here's what can come as a result: happiness, peace, the confidence of knowing that we're right with him. And if in fact that I were to part this life, that I would be accepted of him. He'll be able to look at what I've been able to piece together from following his instructions and know that's what he was wanting. You know, you take that model, you see all the pieces there, and you take the top of the box, and you see what it's supposed to look like. You know, this is what it's supposed to look like. But now, just the pieces, it doesn't look like that. You can see some resemblances, but that's not what it's supposed to look like. It's supposed to look like that. Now then, comparative thought. We have had the model here. Jesus came and provided the model. Here's what it's supposed to look like. Here's what we're supposed to look like. Fashion yourself after him. That's the admonition that is provided. And here's the instruction as to how you can get it done. You listen to him and you listen to his word that now he's left us. So, with that admonition in mind, there may be those who have yet to obey the gospel, and there may be some of that number in our live stream audience. We're hopeful that if in fact that you are mindful of your condition, if you're outside of Christ, one who is not a saved one, then the instructions are rather clear. We're to believe that Jesus is the Christ, or we die in our sin, John 8:24. We're to repent of sin, or we're going to perish, Luke 13:3-5. We're going to have to confess the name of Christ, or he will deny us before the Father in Matthew 10:32-34. And we're going to have to be baptized in order to be saved, Jesus' words in Mark 16. In order to have our sins washed away, Acts 22:16, to have them remitted, Acts 2:38. That's why baptism is done. We submit ourselves to that. Well, if you haven't done that and would like to do that, then simply let us know how we might help. And if anybody's here that needs to do that, then we'll be happy to give that occasion this evening and help you. But as children of God, there are those that have done those things, and sometimes we go beyond God's will and we reproach him, and we disappoint, I'm sure, what he's wanting out of us. We haven't followed the pattern like he's told us that we should, and so we reproach him, and we need to reconcile with him. So the song is selected, number 242. We don't want to miss this beautiful place, and if you want to go there and make yourself right tonight, if you're estranged from him from some reason or the other, make it right. While we stand, while we sing the song.
We read of a voice from heaven, it's made for the pure and the free. These truths of God's word he has given. How beautiful heaven must be. How beautiful heaven must be. Sweet home and happy and free. There they without rest for the weary. How beautiful heaven must be. Good waters of life there are flowing, and how the drink may be free.
Don't forget our services Sunday, 9, 10, and 11. Let's encourage others to come, call, send a note, whatever. And see if you can get some others to come and to be with us. We'll be looking forward to seeing you then. And next Wednesday night again at 7 o'clock, Lord willing. Do be mindful. Next 2 or 3 days, the weather is supposed to make another little nasty turn. So be mindful of that and what things you might do to take care of yourself. So hope everything works out well. We be prayerful to God as well that everything goes good for us. It did last time, incidentally. So we appreciate Brother Elvis's prayer in that regard. So it helped us a great deal. And I'll ask him again. He dismisses this evening.